Hello everyone, this is your friend Naruto Fix, and we are back with another epic What If Naruto fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto's love story started with Anko and Tayuya Part 1. If you love Naruto fanfics, then don't forget to like, subscribe this channel, and join the journey with me. So, let's start the fanfic guys. Tayuya, just hear me out for a second. A young man's voice could be heard that had an amusing, yet pleading tone to it. Naruto, if you ask me one more damn time about how a soup can be eaten with a fork, I'm going to slap you. Said woman responding to her companion. The now named 14-year-old waved his hand dismissively at her comment. Nah, not this time, though I still think you're WR. Naruto stopped speaking when he noticed the girl's ire. He gave an apologetic grin as he continued. No, this time I want your perspective on a new discussion I've been thinking about. Tayuya thought about rejecting the offer. Sometimes the discussions they had were downright stupid, though they could be the exact opposite. She still remembers when they talked about how socks shouldn't be worn when sleeping. She was correct about that one. They definitely shouldn't be worn to bed. Alright, I'm listening, but the second I feel like you're bullshitting, we're going straight home. She stopped walking and stood with her arms crossed over her while shifting her weight to one side. With her movement coming to a halt, Naruto smiled as she acquiesced to his offer. All right, the boy exclaimed, rather exuberantly in her opinion. The topic today is about. He paused for dramatic effect, serving to only annoy the 16-year-old redhead, which she made very clear with a low growl emanating from her throat. Noticing her growing annoyance, Naruto decided to continue. Harems, he declared rather plainly. Tayuya's deadpanned expression could put a certain silver-haired shinobi's mannerisms to shame. As she was about to turn and head directly home, Naruto began giving his speech. Wait, I know it sounds stupid, but hear me out. Tayuya was incredibly close to telling him to fuck off, but she decided to let him explain. She idly noticed that their conversation had gained some onlookers. She could spot a trio of shinobi glancing in the direction, listening to the duo speak to each other. Rolling her eyes, glad we still entertain the mighty shinobi of Konoha. She thought rather sarcastically. The young whiskered teen clapped his hands once and spoke as if he was a teacher speaking to his students. Harems, in today's society, are usually seen as what? Perverted fantasies of the deprived. She replied rather bluntly. Naruto's sweat dropped slightly at the reply but continued on. Oh okay, correct, in a sense, but they are viewed rather negatively, yes. The young redhead nodding her head in agreement with him. They are seen as perverted because of what? He asked expectantly. Tayuya stared at the boy in slight confusion at his question. She racked her brain to come up with something that could answer the follow-up he provided. Try as she might, Tayuya was coming up with a blank. She shrugged her shoulders as a gesture for him to continue. Because that's exactly what they're used for. Naruto replying to her previous statement about the deprived. A simple answer really if one thought about how the question was stated. It all depended on context. Most things did, in all honesty. Tayuya's eyebrows furrowed slightly at the answer her cousin provided. Though the more she fixated on it, the easier to understand why he said it. She was too selfish of an individual to even entertain the idea of being in a harem. She'd slit her own throat with a butter knife before she'd degrade herself like that. Though having my own harem would be kinda interesting, I guess. Nah, too much fucking work, she amusedly thought. The whiskered teen wasn't finished as he continued. Let's take you as an example. There are two guys that have a heavy interest in you and vice versa. Normal society standards would lead you to only being able to choose one man. Tayuya agreed with that. It's how it usually was. But, in all honesty, why care what someone else has to say about who you choose to love? They don't know or understand how you function. How do they know you can't love two men the same? She hated agreeing with the dumbass on these sorts of situations. But he was absolutely correct. Why the fuck would she care about what some dumb has to say about her love life? But she could counter that quite easily. Yeah, but harems have more than two people in 'em, shithead. PFFT. I feel like the average is like 5. That's too many to deal with in my opinion. She didn't like people to begin with. The redhead had a low tolerance for dumb fuckery. And there was far too much dumb fuckery happening in Konoha. Naruto chuckled at his cousin's statement. The girl was very aware of who she was at her core and most certainly didn't care about what others thought of her. They'd either get told to go fuck themselves or she'd assault them. Both were funny and both had repercussions. One more negative than the other obviously. Yeah, I don't think I could handle more than one woman. The blonde replied with a hand on his chin looking up into the sky contemplating how it could work out. I've seen what you're packing, shit's not that impressive. She replied with a smirk. She realized how awful that statement sounded in public but she couldn't resist saying it. It was funny to her. And by his flushed face and twitching eyebrow she clearly made him uncomfortable. That was a definite bonus as well. The villagers who had overheard the statement were far more uncomfortable than Naruto was and they clearly showed the discomfort with looks of disgust. She didn't really give a fuck. She doubted Naruto even really gave a fuck. He was most likely putting on a front. He liked to be dramatic in these situations. She could see the trio of shinobis laughing slightly with the female of the group slapping the arm of her companion with a slightly annoyed expression. Such a prune. The redhead rolled her eyes at that one. Unnecessary. My size notwithstanding, I think it's a good topic to debate. The blonde shrugged his shoulders lightly rolling off the jibe at his size. The two had been living together for almost 6 years now. It's far easier when you grow up with it rather than being thrusted into that kind of situation. Tayuya laughed slightly and nodded her head while gesturing for the boy to follow her now that he had his fun. It just depends on who you talk to about it. Some people are too fucking stuck in their ways. Talking to close-minded people is like talking to a fucking wall. She never understood those kind of people. Naruto bumped his shoulder with hers as he stuck his hands in his pockets with an easy smile. Despite the fact he was 2 years younger than her, that was taller than her. He stood at almost 5 feet 5 inches for fuck's sake. She was still fucking 5 feet tall. She hadn't grown since she was 12. She felt like a damn midget. And the head beside her passed her as soon as he hit 12 and kept going. It was probably karma kicking her for all the shit she talks. That was probably it. Oblivious to the redhead's dilemma, the whiskered blonde glanced at his cousin reminiscing of how she came into his life. The old man had one of his Anbu escort him to his office stating that he had a gift for the boy. Since he was 7 years old at the time, he was ecstatic that he was getting a gift. The surprise on his face as he saw an unfamiliar redhead in the old man's office was definitely noticeable. It was even more memorable due to the first words Tayuya had spoken to him. Who the fuck is this shithead? Will forever be one of his most cherished memories. Tayuya was discovered by an Anbu squad on their return to the village. The leader had noticed smoke and decided to make the call to check it out. The village was ransacked and bodies were strewn everywhere. Imagine their surprise when they find a single little girl with a kitchen knife in her hand and a male body bleeding out beside her. Tayuya never knew who her parents really were. They had both died when she was young. Her father dying before she was even born and her mother passing when she was 5. The only thing Tayuya really remembered about her mother was the fact she had beautiful red hair. It was the only thing that she had as a reminder of her mother. She had never cut it either. It was a little past her at this point, but she didn't care. If there was absolutely one thing Tayuya would pride herself on, was her hair. It was important to her and Naruto respected that. He never teased her about it and most likely never will. He had seen enough people do so and regret it. She was an incredibly difficult person to get to know. Her walls were up past the Hokage mountain if he were being honest. She didn't trust Easy and that was understandable. He didn't have to go through that because they had found out as soon as she entered the village that she was an Uzumaki. Both children being orphans really helped them bond. She held onto that wall for a bit when they were younger, but it had cracked long ago. But to everyone else besides the Hokage and Anko, she'd sooner cut her pinky off than put forth the effort to trust them. She had grown up literally fighting to survive every day. He had grown up similarly to her, but he didn't have it as hard as her. Sure, the villagers glare and talk behind him about his back, but they never tried to physically harm him. Well, There was that one mask shop owner who had pushed him out his store. An Anbu with purple hair and a cat-themed mask had slammed the man on the ground faster than Naruto could have blinked. The woman stomped on the man's arm that he had pushed him with, and a loud crack resonated through the marketplace. The man's cries of pain were silenced when the woman then stomped on his face, knocking him out. After her brutal takedown of the man, she had stated that if anyone were to physically touch him, then they would be executed. She had stated, "You only get one warning." Safe to say he was never touched again. That particular Anbu member was his favorite. The other was a man that had cool silver hair that stuck up to the sky. When he was feeling depressed, the man would always talk with him. The Anbu member's hands would be in his pockets and he would slouch and speak in a lazy drawl. Naruto didn't know if that was how he was or if did that to cheer him up. Either way, it worked every time. Come to think about it, he hadn't seen that particular member for a while now. Hopefully he was okay. Naruto enjoyed the man's presence when he was younger. He still saw the woman though occasionally. Glimpses of her purple hair swaying in the wind just out of his peripheral. But when he would glance in that direction, she'd be gone. Damn Anbu members and their sneakiness. He highly doubted he was actually catching her even with small glimpses. The woman was likely allowing him to see her. He still appreciated it. If her ever found out who those two were, he'd thank them for looking out for him. Tayuya's voice interrupted his train of thought. "I really need to get some new thongs." Naruto's head snapped towards her with a weird expression on his face, as if to say, "Why are you telling me that?" Tayuya smirked at his expression and proceeded to inform him as to why. "Because, dipshit, I want new ones." Naruto's deadpanned expression wasn't all that surprising. "You have like 50 pairs of underwear. Why do you need more? Like really, 50 was enough." Shikamaru was definitely right when he said women are difficult. "See, I want more. If this is too complex for your tiny brain, I can dumb it even further down for you." Her shit-eating grin was all he needed to know. "We can go shopping later. I'm pretty hungry. The academy really drained me today." It really didn't. He was just hungry and needed an excuse. Tayuya didn't buy it for a second, but he said they'd go later and that was good enough for her. No way in hell was she going shopping for womanly needs by herself. That was more awkward to her than going with her cousin. Yes, you did read that correctly. The two teens walked in comfortable silence after their brief conversation, enjoying the comfort of having a family member to be with. It was days like these that both individuals would cherish. Having struggled to survive when younger matured you faster than normal. You learned a lot about who you were as a person and learned to pay attention to small details about others. Naruto had an innate ability when it came to judging other people. He could quite literally sense a person's feelings towards him. He didn't know how, but he just knew. If someone was being genuine with him, then he'd know. Tayuya was similar in that regards, though she could only sense it with chakra. Getting a feel for the person by essentially examining their chakra. She didn't know how far she could push the ability, but she was definitely a strong sensor. Useful abilities to have, really. Approaching their home, Naruto took out the key from his pocket and unlocked his door while stepping inside, with Tayuya following shortly after. The blonde went to find something to eat while Tayuya plopped onto the couch and grabbed a book that sat at the footrest. The sound of a bag being opened was heard as Naruto ate a bag of chips. The boy walked towards the couch that Tayuya was sitting on and plopped down beside her, offering her some chips. The redhead accepted and grabbed a fair amount and continued to read the book. Both teens sitting in comfortable silence while the sound of chips being crunched on were heard. 10 minutes having passed with Tayuya finishing her share, decided to take a shower. "I'm gonna clean my..." Of course, it being said with a very Tayuya-like class. Naruto rolled his eyes with a smile as he continued eating. She walked away to their shared room, picking up the clothes she wanted to wear and stepped into the bathroom. The sound of running water and Tayuya's loud groan of pleasure was heard by Naruto as he again rolled his eyes. "Women." Naruto rolled the bag up and laid it down on the table in front of him next to a framed picture of his little family. He stared at the photo for a bit, with said photo having a younger Naruto and Tayuya with him having a large grin whilst Tayuya gave a genuine smile to the camera. Behind the two of them was their big sister. Read quotas, Mama Bear. Anko was standing behind the two with one of her rare smiles whilst kneeling close to them with her hands on their waists. She held them both protectively close to her. That picture had been taken a year after Tayuya had entered his life. Naruto remembered having met Anko when he was 6. He had bumped into her when he was walking around at the time. She had reflexively turned around to glare at the asshole whom she'd assume had tried to grab her when she spotted the adorable whiskered boy looking up at her. The rest is really history. She had said something along the lines of, "Those scorn should stick together." He hadn't understood her at the time, but as he got older he started to realize what that statement had truly meant. He wasn't stupid. Ignorance is bliss, you know. He was fully aware that he held the QB. October 10th, whisker marks, the glares and whispers. It's not that hard to make the connections. Also helped that he had discovered the seal one day when activating his chakra. Anko was a constant in his life after the silver-haired Anbu stopped appearing. Though she was far more busy nowadays with her being promoted and whatnot. But she made time for the cousins whenever she could. The woman was far tougher to get along with than Tayuya was. And that's saying something. She was overprotective of Tayuya and Naruto, and she didn't care what anyone thought about it. Naruto was far more used to Anko's treatment, having known her longer than Tayuya, though she eventually let Anko thr ours well. While Tayuya would choose more to verbally attack individuals who slighted her or Naruto, Anko would physically do so. She was an excellent shinobi. A very dangerous one as well. Having similar backgrounds as both Naruto and Tayuya, the teens couldn't have had a better person at their backs than Anko. The woman could quite literally get away with murder. Naruto honestly doubted the old man would even look further into the case if it happened. Hiruzen was intelligent and incredibly powerful, but you don't fuck with a woman's children. Civilians had learned that lesson when she had sent a man through a building one day while she was buying Naruto and Tayuya extra clothes for them to have. Shinobi tended to steer away from the woman, mostly due to her short temper. She was actually very fun to be around with once you got used to her personality. If you don't mind a sadist around, that is. Naruto's focus was interrupted as he felt the couch sink in slightly. Looking to the source, he saw Tayuya only wrapped in a towel with a separate one keeping her hair up. He raised an eyebrow wondering why she was only in the towel. "Bathroom's all yours, shithead. Also, see you's I can," she stated before picking her book back up and picking up where she left off. The boy just shrugged before getting up to take a shower. Women. Grunts of exertion could be heard coming from a secluded area inside a small unused training ground. The distinct sounds of a male and female grunting echoed in the small clearing. The Uzumaki duo were working in tandem with each other, tossing a small, but fairly dense slab of concrete towards the other each time they completed a repetition of the desired workout. Naruto had no shirt on as his body glistened in the sun due to the heat. He had a small towel around his neck that he would occasionally use to dry his face with. Tayuya was in similar fashion. She had a black sports bra on with spandex shorts on. While Tayuya would love to admire her cousin's physique, her arms were burning. Kinda kills the whole mood really. They had been at this since sunrise, working their bodies without the aid of chakra. While not entirely uncommon to do so, it helped if you ever were in a pinch and couldn't use excess amounts of chakra. Though to be fair, it was highly unlikely that a situation could occur where Tayuya or Naruto of all people, would run out of chakra. The famed, Uzumaki reserves, staying true to form. Doesn't mean it can't happen. Better safe than sorry. Fucking shit. My arms are killing me. Give me a minute. The redhead huffed out as she fell backwards, dropping the rock in front of her. She wiped the excess sweat off her forehead with the back of her hand as she contemplated whether or not it was worth it to have this sex. Why body? Totally is. I'm fucking banging. No problem. I'll just keep going. Naruto replied as he laid on his back and began to do crunches whilst holding onto the slab of concrete. Tayuya eyed the boy with slight annoyance. The guy had stamina for fucking days. Shit was completely unfair. She loved cracking jokes about his non-existent life, not like she had one either, but the guy was a machine. Exhaling her breath, she glanced up to the sky trying to figure out exactly how long they'd been out here. Too fucking long, she thought rather tiredly. She was also fucking starving. A girl's gotta eat. As the redhead was daydreaming about what they'd eat for dinner tonight, Naruto's thoughts gave way. Konoha, the village he grew up in, where the civilians despised him and the shinobi respected him. A conundrum really, but that's to be expected. It's not like the average villager was spewing fire from their mouth while creating corporeal clones of themselves to fight other superhumans. They wouldn't even be able to grasp the simple context of fuinjutsu. Not many did. The art of sealing was incredibly versatile. The most versatile of the ninja arts in his opinion. Most shinobi would agree. A simple sealing scroll was equivalent to that of something the civvies called calculus. Whatever the hell that was. Sounded like math on steroids mixed with opiates. He didn't really care for math to begin with. If a piece of paper could hold a metal sword, then what else could it do? The golden question really. He held the kyubi, an enormous amount of chakra given form. Though he didn't believe the tales of the Biju being mindless demons. That was stupidity at its finest. Summon animals existed and they could talk, use chakra, and all sorts of other things. To think a Biju was incapable of the same things was baffling. He hasn't been able to contact the fox though. So he couldn't confirm his theory, but he was pretty sure he was correct. The academy had gone over the first Hokage's wife, Mito Uzumaki, the first container of the kyubi. There wasn't much detail about it considering the time. But she had never used the Biju's chakra. Whether that was deliberately or not he couldn't know. Konoha had never needed to flex their Biju before. The village bolstered some of the most talented shinobi the world had ever seen. The first two founders as an example. Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. Monsters those two men were. The Valley of the End was created during their fight. A huge trench of mountain dug up in their spat, stretching as far as the eye could see. Naruto shook his head at that thought. Those two men would lay the foundation of the shinobi world. Having established Konoha as the first real shinobi village, it would make logical sense that Konoha would then in turn create talented and powerful ninjas. The legendary Sannin, which consisted of Jiraiya the Toad Sage, Orochimaru the Snake Summoner, Tsunade Senju, otherwise commonly referred to as Wonder Woman. There wasn't a thing she couldn't do. The White Fang, Tsukumo Hatake, stated being able to rival even the legendary Sannin. Hell, even his son had a fearsome reputation. Copycat Kakashi, Kakashi Hatake. The man with 1,000 jutsus under his belt. Insane to think about. The four Hokages all being incredibly powerful in their respective lights. Their reputations were feared for good reasons. Simply stating, Yellow Flash, and you'd make some of the strongest Iwa Jonin cower. Most recent additions were from the Uchiha. The Shinigami aka Mikoto Uchiha. The Reaper of the Uchiha clan, Itachi Uchiha and Shunshin Shisui or Shisui Uchiha. Those three were something else entirely. Sharingan uses were dangerous enough. S-rank uses, yeah, kind of speaks for itself. Though while Konoha produces powerful shinobi, the village is cursed with tragedy. Some believing that the sins of shinobis that have transpired since the beginning of the shinobi villages takes its vengeance on Konoha. Dating all the way back to Madara's self-exile. Following up on Tobirama Senju's sacrifice to ensure Hiruzen and his squad arrived to Konoha safely. Staying back and fending off 20s rank Kumo Nin. Killing each and every one of them before subsequently falling victim to his injuries. Continuing on with Uzuyoshio's annihilation at the hands of 3 out of 5 of the great villages. Kumo, Iwa, and Kiri coming to an alliance to rid the world of the Uzumakis. The force of 10,000 shinobi had attacked the small island. While the island did fall, Azu's leader had sent word to Hiruzen about the attack. The third Hokage had gathered some of his strongest ninja to aid. His 3 students joining him to help their sister village. While the combined forces of Kumo, Kiri, and Iwa had successfully destroyed Azu, their 10,000 force had been drastically cut to just barely 1,000. With many of the remaining shinobis having suffered injuries, they were not able to fend off an angered Hiruzen and his students. Hiruzen had decimated the remaining enemies, taking out more than half of them by himself. After Azu's tragic fall, Konoha had then lost one of their strongest shinobi. Tsukumo Hitaki would go on and take his life after having failed a mission. Choosing to save his team than risk their lives for information that could harm the village. The White Fang was ridiculed for his choice by his peers, so much so that the man took his life, leaving his 6-year-old son to fend for himself. A man that had gave everything to his village was betrayed by the very people he sought to protect. An angered Hiruzen had seen fit to gather those that besmirched the late great man and punish them accordingly. Following Tsukumo's suicide was Orochimaru's subsequent betrayal of the leaf, experimenting on children and villages within the village's walls no less. Hiruzen had hesitated that day. He could have killed Orochimaru, but that second of hesitation was all the snake needed to escape. It was the old man's biggest regret in life. A couple of years after Orochimaru's betrayal, the Leaf would go on to lose a good portion of their ninja and their recently promoted 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, defending his village against the Kyuubi and going on to seal the beast into an infant. The man had worn the hat for no more than 2 years. Minato had the potential to pass his predecessors, but it was not to be. The most recent tragedy the village having suffered happened a couple of months after Naruto turned 14. The tragedy known as the Uchiha Massacre. Though in Naruto's opinion, it was more of a blessing than anything. The delusions of a paranoid madman gathering half of the Uchihas to try to force a coup d'etat. It was unsuccessful due to Mikoto, Itachi, and Shisui, the three having come together to kill every single conspirator in the dead of night. It would have been done quietly if it weren't for Mikoto's slight hesitation in slitting Fugaku's throat. Resenting the man that forced her firstborn son to witness the horrors that war had cemented in her mind. Though she resented him, she still held a sliver of love for him. Having woken up to the katana resting at his throat, he had tried for a hasty fire jutsu. Mikoto was unscathed, but it had alerted the Anbu, and while slitting Fugaku's throat before he could counter, she decided to face the music. Itachi, Shisui and Mikoto were questioned about everything that happened and even provided evidence. Hiruzen had caught wind that a revolt was circulating but couldn't confirm if the Uchiha would go through with it. While Konoha may have lost more than half of the Uchihas, he didn't lose the strongest and most loyal to the Leaf. While it was unfortunate that it had come to this point, Hiruzen was thankful it was solved with minimal bloodshed. The Uchihas would heal from this wound. It would also show that Mikoto was one to be feared. She had made a strong statement that night. The woman was the great-granddaughter of Madara Uchiha. One didn't cross the Shinigami and not expect retaliation. Allowing Fugaku to lead the Uchihas was a foolish mistake on her part. One she would rectify immediately. While it sucks a ton of people died that night, it was a necessary evil. At least Naruto thought so. Those idiots could have done far more damage if Sasuke's family hadn't taken action when they did. The raven-haired Uchiha didn't show up for a week after the event. Though when he finally did return, the boy seemed as if a weight had been lifted off his back. Naruto assumed the boy was being pushed just as hard as Itachi was when he was younger. The whiskered teen thought that notion was foolish. You can't replicate Itachi's success. That man was a once-in-a-lifetime prodigy. Sasuke was incredibly talented, but he was no Itachi. The bot had accepted that fact long ago. Itachi could give the old man a run for his money when he was Naruto's age. That's not normal. At least that's what the old man told him. The boy had no reason to not believe Hiruzen. He severely doubted the 3rd Hokage said it for shits and giggles. The worst tragedy that had hit Konoha was Tsunade's, in Naruto's opinion at least. The boy frowned heavily as he thought of what had happened to the beautiful woman. He had been curious as to why the woman was never in the Leaf. Hiruzen had adopted a forlorn expression as he told Tsunade's tale. The woman had lost the love of her life in a skirmish. The man, Dan, had been fatally wounded on the battlefield, and Tsunade had tried her damnedest to heal him. He died in her arms whilst blood painted Tsunade's body. Naruto could see the reason behind her leave, but he didn't think it was reason enough for her to leave. That is until Hiruzen continued the tale. A month after Dan's death, her little brother Nawaki had died on his first patrol outside the village. The beautiful woman was broken even further after finding out he passed. Naruto had resisted the urge to frown when he was told. If Naruto thought that was the worst part, he was horribly mistaken. After grieving Nawaki's death, the woman had then found out she was carrying Dan's child. Due to the stress of losing two of the men she loved most, she had a miscarriage. Naruto had been speechless as he had heard the woman's story. The boy couldn't imagine going through something like that. The image of Tayuya replacing Dan's bleeding body and having to bury Anko's body like Tsunade did to Nawaki was enough to make him. "Hey, you okay, Naruto?" Tayuya's voice was surprisingly gentle. The whiskered teen blinked at the question and turned his head to meet a pair of concerned amber eyes looking directly at him. "Yeah, why do you ask?" She gestured to her eyes and spoke, "You're crying." Naruto wiped his eyes only to find he had been crying. Huh, guess it was enough. Naruto wiped his eyes clean as he gave a genuine smile towards his cousin. "Yeah, I was just thinking of what it would have been like without you or Anko in my life." The boy turned his head to look at the sky with that same smile on his face. Tayuya's eyes lingered on the boy's face before she sighed quietly to herself. She pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. She couldn't imagine what her life would have been like without Naruto or Anko. She could, but it wouldn't be pretty. She may never say the words out loud, but she did love the older woman and her cousin. They were family. She just hoped they ended up on the same team or she'd start cutting people's throats. She sighed again as she watched the clouds slowly shift and change in the sky. Several minutes having passed by, Tayuya's stomach decided it was time for food. With an obnoxiously loud groan coming from it, Naruto glanced her way with a raised eyebrow while she pouted. "What? I'm fucking starving." The boy laughed loudly to himself at her pout. The redhead's eyebrow began to twitch as he still kept laughing. She'd give him something to laugh about. She jumped forward, slamming her weight into him as she gripped his cheeks with her hands and began stretching them to their limits. "Keep laughing at me and I'll cut these damn whiskers off too." The boy couldn't help but continue to laugh despite the constant tugging on his face. "Love you too, Tayuya." "All right, class, pay attention." A man's voice rang through the sizable room filled with future shinobis. The man had a unique scar that ran through the bridge of his nose across his face horizontally. Iruka Yumino, or as Tayuya liked to call him, Shithead Sensei. Not the most creative person in the world, but she tried. Naruto appreciated the effort. Whatever made her happy in turn made him happy. "Today I want to change things up. You all will eventually be graduating to become protectors of our home. But I want to ask you all a question." The man gained a more serious demeanor as he finished his statement while crossing his arms across his chest. "Why do you want to become shinobi?" The question was pretty simple if you took it at face value. But it was also double-layered. Hell, probably triple-layered. Anything dealing with subjects regarding being a shinobi were always complex. Though Iruka could also just be asking in general. Didn't stop some of the students from just bulldozing through the question without properly thinking. Idiots. Naruto thought rather boredly. He could tell his cousin was of similar mind. If he was bored, then she must be contemplating stabbing her hand with her dagger. He eyed the girl just to make sure she wasn't actually doing so. Naruto's expression became flat when he realized it was exactly what she was doing. Tayuya had her dagger lined up on the back of her hand as if judging the distance and time it would take to fully stab through. The boy snatched the knife without a word and sheathed it inside one of his spare sheaths for moments just like this. Tayuya didn't appreciate the action and rightfully slapped him hard on the back of his head. The noise attracting the attention of several of the students and Iruka himself. Iruka decided that if the duo were that bored, then he would personally question them. "So Naruto, since my lesson is so boring to you, why don't you tell me why you want to be a shinobi?" Iruka placed his hands on his hips while tilting his head slightly to the left. Most of the class turned towards the pair at the back of the classroom, with some actually curious as to why the whiskered boy wanted to be a ninja. He had rarely spoke in class, only speaking when called on or if Tayuya and him were talking. The few times the boy did talk, it was to Sasuke or Shikamaru. And they were generic topics usually. Naruto pursed his lips as he decided for once that he would answer the question. He leaned back in his chair while crossing his arms across his chest, well aware of the fact that the entire classroom was paying close attention. Why did he want to be a shinobi? A loaded question, a dangerous one for someone like him. His eyes glanced down towards the table as his face adopted a frown. This question was actually starting to bother him. He was the vessel of the Kyuubi. It was his duty, his job to do so. When he found out he contained the Biju, he knew that regardless of what he wanted to be in life that he would have to eventually become a ninja. He didn't have a choice. Because I don't have a choice. It's my job to do so. The reply was bitter. It was a response that many of the other students didn't expect. Judging by their expressions, Naruto didn't blame them. Most, if not all of his generation didn't know he harbored the Kyuubi. Didn't stop the civies from telling their children to avoid him. Not that he really cared. The only people in this room that knew about it was Tayuya and Iruka. He glanced at Sasuke and Shikamaru and noticed that they had narrowed eyes while staring at him. He figured that Shikamaru most likely knew and that Sasuke was beginning to truly realize it. Iruka's eye grew soft at Naruto's reply. He wasn't necessarily wrong. The boy had a Biju in him. It's not like he would ever have a normal life. He could definitely try, but war doesn't rest. And the village would eventually have use for him. As awful as that sounded, it was just how the shinobi world was. Iruka didn't even like sending children off to become shinobi. But the world doesn't change overnight. The shinobi world would never know peace. It was a naive dream. People with power will always want to keep that power. Take that man out and another would replace the previous. Or this organization would replace them and the cycle would continue. No, the world would never be at peace. Tayuya had a scowl on her face as she heard the bitterness that followed Naruto's statement. It made her angry, but she knew that Naruto was correct. He couldn't fight it. He had to deal with it. He was the Kyuubi's jailer. Her fingernails dug into her palms while her knuckles colored white. She took a deep breath, willing herself to calm down. I'll always carry this burden. And I might not like it. But it's my duty. The boy continued while he glanced out the window of the academy with a wistful look to his face. I'll never know what it's like to be normal. As much as I would love to never have to take another person's life, I know that it's foolish to think I can be a shinobi with a clean record. The boy shook his head with a downturned expression. I'll do my job with a fake smile on my face because I'm expected to do so. The whiskered teen became quiet for a few moments before eventually sighing. He shook his head slightly and stood up while slowly heading for the door to leave the classroom. His mood having turned very depressing very quickly. The boy brushed slightly past Iruka as he made his way to the door to leave. Iruka closed his eyes while he let Naruto leave the classroom. The boy needed it. He wouldn't force him to stay. He had suffered enough. Tayuya's chair crashed to the ground as she ran after her cousin with a scowl. Iruka let her pass as well. He knew full well that trying to stop her would make things even worse. The man shook his head slightly at what had just transpired. He didn't resent the boy. No, he respected the boy. As most of the shinobi in Konoha did. The boy held a walking catastrophe. It was just common sense to treat the individual who had a hold on your life positively. Both literally and figuratively. If push came to shove, what would stop the boy from releasing the Biju in the village? There was no fourth Hokage to save them this time. The fact the villagers didn't see that was appalling. The only thing keeping the boy in line was his pseudo mother and cousin. What would have happened had Anko and Tayuya not been in his life? Iruka physically shuddered at the thought. This village likely wouldn't be standing. He breathed in deeply and finally opened his eyes. The entire classroom had various degrees of shock, surprise and confusion. Though there were a couple with frowns on their faces, those mainly coming from the clan heirs and heiresses, they had always wondered why people tended to avoid Naruto. It didn't even take much effort to notice something was wrong with how Naruto was treated. With each of them expressing these thoughts to their parents, they would get the same answer each time they asked. It's not my place to tell. It only furthered their curiosity. Despite what Naruto suspected of the other clan heirs, most of them actually suspected the boy and the Kyuubi were con. See Ted in some way. His last name was Uzumaki. The only other person with that last name that they were aware of, besides Tayuya of course, was the first container of the Kyuubi. Mito Uzumaki. It wasn't that hard to put two and two together. Naruto tended to overanalyze situations. This information didn't really bother them as much. Naruto was normal enough. A bit antisocial sure, but he did grow up neglected and ostracized his whole life. None of them could truly understand his plight. Iruka's reaction only confirmed their suspicions. Most tended to regard Naruto with respect. Seasoned, veteran shinobi respecting a child that hadn't even become a ninja yet. As if that wasn't noticeable. Iruka clapped his hands, causing the students to snap from their thoughts. Class is dismissed for the day. The Chunin proceeded to sit at his desk and rub his eyes. The recent event having truly showed him just how much Naruto was affected by his situation. The boy had a tight hold on his emotions usually. The emotions that had gone through the young man's eyes could have fooled Iruka into believing the boy was far older than he truly was. He had seen those kind of eyes on older shinobi. Men like Kakashi Hatake and Asuma Sarutobi came to mind. There wasn't much Iruka could do for Naruto other than offer advice and help when the boy needed it. Not like the boy would ask for it anyway. He was prideful, not incredibly so but enough to avoid asking for help. He'd rather do things on his own, with only ever asking Tayuya to help with certain situations, though eventually the teen would have to ask for help and guidance. He couldn't do everything alone. He'd bring it up to the Hokage later. Highly unlikely that he wouldn't know by the time Iruka managed to speak with him. The teen still had several Anbu members entrusted to keep watch over him. Not because Hiruzen thought he was a danger to Konoha, but to make sure no one dared try to antagonize the boy. Tayuya did just fine warding people off. He was more worried about Anko. The old man would turn a blind eye to the reports of certain civilian cases that ended up at his desk. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Naruto's personal watcher was most likely already informing Hiruzen. Iruka just sighed as he proceeded to grade papers. He was going to have a long night. I heard about what happened today. A calm feminine voice sounded throughout the room. You going to talk or will I have to make you? A beautiful woman with dark almost black, purple hair questioned Naruto. Said boy was currently laying down on his couch while staring at the ceiling of his shared apartment with Tayuya. He didn't respond to the woman's question though he had heard her. He may have been Anko's favorite person in the village but he knew the woman demanded respect. Naruto narrowed his eyes slightly as he formulated his thoughts. He didn't want Anko to fly off the handle towards Iruka. The man couldn't have known how he would have responded. Iruka wasn't at fault. It was just a simple question. I let my emotions get the best of me. The whiskered teen propped his arm under the back of his head as he continued. It was a simple question. Anko crossed her arms and placed them beneath her bust as she stared at her self-proclaimed son. She believed what he said. The boy was incapable of lying to her after all. He had never done so before and she honestly doubted he ever would. He'd never disrespect the woman that he had come to see as his mother. While not being blood-related it didn't matter. When he was younger he saw her as a big sister. The notion of having a mother proved to be too strong though. The older he got, the more he saw her as his mother. She had taken care of him, had provided food and at extreme times, even shelter. Bought him necessities and comforted him when he needed it. At some point, the ideals had just merged. Sure she was far busier now than before and it was more rare to see her every day, but she tried. And that was all that really mattered to the boy. She continued to stare at the boy for a few more seconds. It had the effect she wanted and the boy finally turned to look at her. He blinked while furrowing his eyebrows in confusion as she stared at him. Anko walked over to the boy before sitting next to where he was laying. She proceeded to gently run her hands through the boy's hair while a soft smile developed on her face. The gentle ministrations eased the tension that circulated in the boy's body. He gave a quiet sigh as she gently combed the boy's hair between her fingers. I believe you. I just wanted you to tell me. You know you can tell me anything, right? The question was presented teasingly but Naruto knew she was serious. The teen slowly closed his eyes as the woman continued her actions. I know. He cut himself off prematurely as he thought of what he needed to say. Anko let the boy gather his thoughts, idly continuing her actions, sometimes slicing through the mane of bright yellow hair and other times folding them over one another. It had the intended effect as the boy significantly relaxed in his position on the couch. He proceeded to speak but more quietly. I just didn't want you to get aggravated at Iruka. It wasn't his fault. The woman gave a slight humming noise to his response. Whether she agreed with his statement or not the teen didn't know. He was far too relaxed currently to even care. I figured as much. Iruka knows better. I'd gut his with a ruler otherwise. The woman had a smirk on her face as the words left her mouth. Naruto cracked a little smile at the response. Far too used to her personality. Most people were intimidated by her. Which was fair, she was a scary woman after all. The two were quiet after Anko's statement. Naruto enjoying the gentle gestures to his hair and Anko enjoying the silence. Several minutes passed by before Naruto decided to speak again. Where's Tayuya at? The woman paused in her actions for a few seconds before responding. She went to get some food. She figured the way to your heart was through your stomach. The woman had a teasing smile on her face. The teen's eyes snapped open at that and he gave an annoyed expression at the statement. Stop that. The woman laughed at his face and request. You should be telling Tayuya that. Anko thought amusedly. The cousins' unique relationship with each other notwithstanding, Anko had enough ammo to mess with them for years to come. Tayuya wouldn't care as much but she could annoy Naruto with it forever. Tayuya was as independent as they come. She knew what she wanted. It's a known fact that women mature faster than men. How? She wouldn't fucking know. She's not a scientist. She just tortured people with rusty kunais. Leave the smart guy shit to the smart guy people. Tayuya's infatuation with Naruto was actually pretty subtle. Due to her unique personality, most would write it off as genuine annoyance. Tayuya's idea of flirting was light physical violence, similar to how young boys are to the girls they have a crush on. But just multiplied by 8. Add in some punches and the occasional slur that the redhead would sling around and that's flirting. Despite the stupidity of how that sounded, it's not like Anko was any better. Her idea of a good date was cutting a man open while sipping on a fine wine. What? That was absolutely a fucking date. The sound of the door opening drew both of the individuals' attention. Tayuya could be seen walking with a bag of what Anko immediately recognized as Ichiraku ramen. She rolled her eyes at that one. Those two would fucking inhale the father-daughter duo's food, claiming that the gods themselves blessed the ramen stand owner's ability to create the perfect ramen dish. The food was actually pretty good if she was being honest, but those two practically worshipped it. Again, she couldn't really say anything about their obsession. She guzzled dango down like a slut on a Friday night. The whiskered teen's eyes practically shone with happiness at the food Tayuya decided to purchase. They only ever ate Ichirakus for big occasions, wanting to savor the tastiness and divine blessings the food had to offer. Tayuya noticed the boy's intense gaze and couldn't help but give a small smile at the boy's eagerness. The petite redhead may love the shit as much as Naruto, but she could contain her excitement far better than he ever would and/or could. Stay. Her voice was stern as she gave Naruto a small glare. Move from that spot without my permission and I will throw yours away. Don't fucking test me. The boy knew a threat when he heard one. Tayuya absolutely would trash the food. While he would have been far happier to be able to eat the food now, he could wait patiently. Anko gave an amused chuckle at the girl's statement. Tayuya was busy taking portions of the food and meticulously placing them in certain areas of the giant bowl. Again, Anko had to reiterate how much the two Uzumakis loved the brothy dish. With several minutes passing by, Anko decided she had stayed long enough. She was not gonna be a third wheel. She got too much of that shit with Kurenai and Asuma. She didn't need it from her own fucking kids either. She'd sooner give up torturing people before she let herself be a third wheel to these ramen-worshipping teenagers. Well, she began as she lightly patted the boy's head. I'm gonna bounce. I just wanted to see how you two were doing. I got a mission to some fucking place in the boonies of Fire Country. I'll be back in around a week or so. I don't wanna come home to no fucking babies either. Wrap it up. The woman had one of the most shit-eating grins on her face. Naruto gave a loud groan while shaking his head at Anko's statement, and Tayuya's eyebrow twitched as she snapped the utensils in her hand. Have fun. All alone. Together. With no one around. UNSUPER. Anko's sentence was cut short as two broken pieces of wood flew past her and hit the wall beside the door panel leading outside of her shared apartment. Anko was giggling while already out the door. She could hear Tayuya's string of curses as she continued down the stairs while Naruto's voice would ring out trying to calm her down. Love you too, Tayuya. If I cooked a chicken with a fire jutsu, would it taste the same as if I cooked it on an open campfire, or would it taste differently? Tayuya's head slowly rotated towards the person who asked the question with an incredibly terrifying blank face. If I slit your throat, would the blood spew differently from left to right or right to left? She questioned back in a calm tone while retaining the blank expression. Naruto cringed at the question his cousin asked and decided that living was a far better alternative. Good choice. Several students in the class visibly shuddered or recoiled at the simple question. Tayuya absolutely terrified most of the teens in the class, for a variety of different reasons. She was violent, intimidating, and strong. Being able to go toe-to-toe with some of the stronger clan heirs in the class and decimating her female counterparts. The only other female in the group to actually be of challenge to her was Hinata Hyuga. Mostly due to the fact that her clan specialized in close-quarters combat. She was the only person in the class besides Sasuke that could make Naruto sweat during a spar. Skill and stamina playing a major role in this. Sasuke was incredibly gifted. He knew it, the other students knew it, and even his clan acknowledged it. But damn it, the whiskered teen would make Sasuke work for it. If one were to look at each shinobi hopeful and calculate the stats on a piece of paper, the rankings from 1 to 10 could look akin to 1. Sasuke Uchiha. 2. Naruto Uzumaki. 3. Tayuya Uzumaki. 4. Kiba Inuzuka. 5. Shino Aburame. 6. Hinata Hyuga. 7. Choji Akamaiki. 8. Rei Uchiha. 9. Sai. 10. Ino Yamanaka. But in Sasuke's opinion, while he may be talented in all levels of the shinobi arts besides sealing, he would place himself below Naruto and Tayuya. After all, they could fight longer, use more chakra, and had more diversity due to their unorthodox style of fighting. But the duo never really gave it their all in the academy. They would beat the absolute shit out of each other after classes in their training grounds. Sasuke had bear witness to that multiple times. But they had never gone as hard on the academy grounds. He figured they just didn't care all that much about putting on a show. He could respect that. Sasuke had always wanted to graduate early, but his mother would prevent such things. He didn't blame her. She had tried her damnedest to give him the life that Itachi never got to have. While being responsible for personally taking his father's life, he hadn't been angry at her. The man had expected far too much from him. Sasuke knew his limits. He wasn't stupid or arrogant enough to think he could match Itachi's prowess. The only individual with a better track record than Itachi's was the fourth Hokage. Right, let me just outshine Minato Namikaze. It'll only take a second. The raven-haired male thought sarcastically with a roll of his eyes. The man was barely 20 when he stopped an entire Iwa army of 2,000 strong with one fucking jutsu. The man wasn't even in his prime yet. Itachi could stand on equal grounds with the third Hokage. His older brother was far too modest. He was humble to a fault. But at some point, you have to acknowledge the fact you were of equal footing with a veteran Kage with over 50 years of experience under his belt. Hiruzen may not be in his prime, but you don't get to the old man's age without being insanely fucking powerful. The Uchiha clan produced talented shinobi. And Sasuke knew it was mostly due to the power of their eyes. The Sharingan, a curse of power if there ever was one. While the clan may have lost half of their members due to the massacre, it was a far cry of what could have happened had his father been successful. The fact that 3 members of the clan were capable of dealing with arguably the village's strongest clan, just furthered the notion that just because one possessed the Sharingan did not make them invincible. His brother was known for not actually using his Sharingan. Itachi had solidified himself in the clan as an outcast. Many of the supporters of the coup had a distaste of the man. He was humble, he was quiet, and he was a pacifist. Three ideals that most shinobi weren't. He always cherished life, but he knew something like peace was unattainable. Man didn't have the capability of coexisting without some measure of hostility. So Itachi had put his efforts into protecting the leaf and making sure that the enemies that would violate Konoha's own peace would be dealt with, stating that, should an enemy of Konoha threaten her peaceful existence, I will snuff him out. Itachi was a dangerous man. He may be calm and nice, but he was a true shinobi. He was possibly the strongest nin that Konoha currently had. Only time would tell if the man was capable of taking up the role of Hokage. Hiruzen had hinted towards a certain Uchiha being of interest to wear the hat. It couldn't be Shisui. He was far too irresponsible of such a task. His cousin was more Uzumaki than Uchiha. Most of the clan had ostracized him like Itachi. The man was all smiles. Too laid back for his own good. He never took things too serious, but he also knew when to cut the shenanigans. He was a shinobi. He had similar ideals to Itachi. While not a pacifist like his best friend, he would protect Konoha to his dying breath, doing anything in his power to make sure she lived to see the future. Naruto and Shisui would get along well. They were similar in a lot of ways. Sasuke wasn't sure about Naruto's undying loyalty to Konoha due to his upbringing. But other than that, he and Shisui would probably be best friends. His friendship with the two Uzumakis was actually pretty positive. Well, Tayuya didn't call him a stupid cocksucker, so he definitely took that as a plus. And Naruto actually engaged in conversation with him. They were practically best friends if Naruto seeked out Sasuke for conversation. It had happened a little after the Uchiha massacre and Sasuke highly doubted it was due to pity. Naruto was the last person in the village who would accept pity. So he knew that Naruto was doing so out of his own volition. Naruto had an interesting outlook on life. Growing up the way he did, the raven-haired teen figured that was a given. He asked some of the dumbest questions he'd ever heard in his life. But if you were to peel the layer of humor regarding many of his questions and topics, then you could see the intricate way of thinking Naruto possessed. Sasuke was positive that Naruto possessed some degree of intelligence similar to that of Inara. While not having something insane like a 200 IQ like a majority of the Naris in the village, the boy had a knack for patterns and irregularities in subjects. His way of fighting was a good way of witnessing it. Sasuke was unable to think like Naruto did. The Uchiha was meticulous with how he approached combat. Every single Uchiha was actually. The clan was full of logical thinkers, with Shisui most likely being the only individual who didn't. Naruto acted on instinct. Despite what most thought, the ability to act purely on instinct was difficult. It was almost downright impossible for Uchihas. The Uchiha could only preform the feats they do because of the Sharingan's ability of pseudo precognition, seeming as if they were acting on pure instinct. But anyone who knew how the eyes worked could spot the innate difference between Naruto and Sasuke's style of fighting. That being that Naruto didn't actually possess a way of fighting. When Sasuke said the boy fought on instinct, he meant it. At first glance you could chop it up to a style of reactionary combat, waiting for your enemy to engage and then counter them or push the offense and patiently wait for opening. No, Naruto didn't fight like that. Someone like Might Guy would notice immediately the way that Naruto would fight. It was dangerous for shinobi to be unable to react to someone who didn't fight with patterns. You would overthink your next move. Most shinobi saw combat as a chess game, or shogi match. Plan your steps ahead, with each step branching off with predicting what your opponent would do. If you threw a straight right, would your opponent dodge? Would they block? Which arm would they choose to block with? Would they instead wish to grapple your attack to get the upper advantage? It's why Naruto was far more dangerous in a fight. He didn't think like a majority of other ninjas. Itachi had told him that Naruto was a dangerous fighter. His brother having came to the academy to watch the progression of the heirs and heiresses. While Tayuya wasn't as unpredictable with how she fought, she more than made up for it with her insane flexibility. Anko might have had something to do with that one. Both Uzumakis were powerful fighters, able to take as much damage as they dished out. It was a normal thing to witness Naruto take constant barrages of attacks, but to see the girl tank just as much as her cousin was incredible. Sasuke chalked it up to Uzumaki bullshit, his mother having informed him that Uzumakis were a force to be reckoned with. She would talk about her old best friend but would never put a name to the woman. Sasuke likely assumed that she had perished during the Kyuubi attack. It made Sasuke wonder if that woman was Naruto's actual birth mother and had perished while protecting her newborn son. It would be poetic and incredibly sad. The Uchiha teen shook his head lightly at the thought. The boy glanced at the duo. If he didn't know any better, he'd say those two were far closer than normal cousins were. The casual way they spoke to each other regarding personal matters in their life was a little too close. It didn't bother Sasuke. The Uchiha clan and the Hyuga were far more traditional in the way they approached internal affairs. The Uchiha were known for inbreeding. It wasn't as bad as it sounded, but it kept the blood pure. There weren't brothers and sisters fornicating or anything but fourth cousins and onwards. The Hyuga were far more into bread. They kept their blood absolute. Many Uchiha chose to wed outside of the clan because the Sharingan was able to pass on to their children easily. The Byakugan was another story. It was far more rare for it to manifest if two Hyugas weren't the ones creating the child. So while inbreeding wasn't anything unheard of, it was still an eyebrow raiser in his opinion. The way Tayuya would stare at Naruto and vice versa was a giveaway if you paid attention to them for longer than 5 minutes. I just wonder when the tension will finally start. The boy thought amusingly. He dare not say those words aloud. He was far too intelligent to get on Tayuya's shit list. She also scared him. So there's that. Naruto's eyes found his and a silent conversation was communicated. Tayuya. Yes. Interesting. Both boys nodded to each other. Ray. Sasuke stared hard at the whiskered teen. Figured. Sasuke turned away from the boy with an annoyed expression while Naruto smirked slightly. Tayuya eyed the boys with confusion. They hadn't even spoken a word. What the fuck? Tayuya shook her head and leaned her chair back to balance on the back legs while placing her right foot on the table for balance. She closed her eyes while she occasionally shifted the weight to rock slowly in the chair. Naruto's eyes betrayed his will and he glanced towards the petite redhead. The girl wore tight jet black leggings that disappeared under a combat skirt. A white button-up long-sleeve shirt adorned her upper torso. The sleeves were rolled up to her forearms while the first 3 buttons were undone, showing a small amount of her cleavage. His eyes roamed up from her chest trailing past her neck to her face. The girl had a surprisingly calm expression on her face. Normally the girl's scowl was on display about 90% of the time. If he was being honest, he preferred the scowl. Though she was beautiful regardless. Despite her reputation, she was still glanced at and eyed by men of the village. The slight influx of chakra that was released by Naruto during that thought was akin to a slight rush of wind. Stray papers that weren't held down were blown off the tables and a slight pressure placed itself on the show. Elders of the students in the class. Tayuya's eyes immediately opened to find Naruto gazing at her intently. She had been subjected to Naruto's chakra since he had unlocked it several years ago. It always had a dense feeling to it. It was heavy, almost as if he could crush you with his chakra presence alone. But it was never usually a negative feeling. His chakra had always felt like a weighted wool blanket. Warm and cozy. She had yet been subjected to his chakra in a negative way. While she locked eyes with the boy, she could tell that he wasn't angry at her. Something had triggered the boy. The boy's chakra continued to pulse, almost as if it were alive. A malicious aura having manifested in the room, akin to a predator eyeing its next meal. The slight glow of a red outline having formed above the boy's skin. Similar if one were to sweat and step into the sun. A sheen of red danced over the boy's body. A shade of crimson had developed in his sapphire eyes, blending them into a shade of dark purple. She was mesmerized by the sight of them. She didn't feel as if she was in any particular danger, but the same could not be said for everyone else in the class. The second the rush of chakra saturated the air, Iruka knew that something was wrong. His immediate thought was to get as far away from the danger as possible. But he ruthlessly slammed those emotions to the ground. He had to calm himself and get control. His eyes landed on Naruto. The boy was staring intently at Tayuya. Not blinking, nor was he moving a muscle. She was of similar mind. Seemingly in a haze. This was the first time Iruka was feeling the chakra of the Kyuubi since that night 14 years ago. It wasn't as terrifying, but it was no less unnerving. Iruka couldn't logically discover any reason as to what would have set Naruto off. The boy was completely fine. He had been smiling just a minute before the wave of horrid chakra permeated the room. Iruka could tell most of the children were frozen in fear. Iruka wasn't surprised. A sliver of the Kyuubi's chakra was enough to make seasoned Jonin's knees shake. And while this wasn't the full brunt of the Bijuu's force, it was still something that demanded fealty. A primal urge. Naruto's head tilted slightly while he stared at Tayuya. His eyes snapped to the left abruptly. Not a second later did an Anbu with purple hair and a cat mask appear beside the boy. The woman's head tilted down while looking at the whiskered teen. The two stared at each other, almost as if a battle of wills were underway. The way the boy stared unflinchingly into the black eye holes of the mask unnerved Iruka. He couldn't fathom how the woman could bear the weight of the chakra. Kat's head tilted to the left while her voice came out calm and leveled. "Do you wish to fight me?" The question was so asinine that it froze Iruka to his very core. Was she trying to antagonize him further? Exclamation mark. His heart raced madly in his chest as he stared at the scene that could only be a nightmare given true form. The magenta shade of eyes bore into the holes of the mask for a scant few seconds. After what seemed like an eternity for everyone in the room, the boy closed his eyes slowly. As if a switch had been flipped, the chakra disappeared. The terrifying weight that had encompassed the room seemingly vacated. The boy's eyes remained closed even as he felt a familiar hand brush against the back of his right hand. Knowing exactly who it was, the boy gently turned his right hand over to cuff the smaller hand. Though the boy refused to open his eyes, scared of what he'd see if he so much as peeked. He didn't want to peel back that curtain. Not after what just transpired. A second hand joined atop his hand. Gentle brushes encircling along the back of his dominant hand. He was close to ripping off the band-aid. But he had no want to do so. The looks would only serve to anger him more. The fury he'd attain at seeing them. To witness even this generation ostracizing him. It would make him sick to his stomach. He wouldn't be able to control it this time. That blanket of hate would sooner cover this room in blood than be subjected to the fear. He would rend the flesh off. The hands that previously held the right hand had vacated his grip and instead found purchase on both sides of his cheeks. His head was forcibly turned towards the direction of the one who held him. His eyes snapped open, no longer being able to remain shut. His vision was blurry. He couldn't see well, as if his eyes were continuously being doused in water. He could make out something honey-colored followed by a beautiful sea of red. It coalesced into something breathtaking. A goddess-given human form. A smile formed on the woman's face. Her mouth moved but he could hear no words. His ears were ringing, as if an exploding tag was set off directly in front of him. The breathtaking woman had tilted her head at the boy. The next thing Naruto saw was black. That sound had an eerie quality to it, Naruto thought. It was almost without cadence. Long enough pauses between the drops splashing, giving a false sense of normality. It felt like hours had gone by. He didn't know what time it was. Was there time here? Could there be time here? He was starting to develop a headache. In his own mind no less. This blows, the boy thought. His ears still rang from the earlier event. He opened his eyes and glanced at his surrounding with caution. This area seemed so familiar. He couldn't place where he had seen this. He knew that he was in his mind. As weird as that sounded. But yet, it didn't feel right. He felt like an intruder. That he was not supposed to be here. He furrowed his eyebrows as he glanced down towards his hands. Naruto could clearly see his body. Which meant he had a physical form in his mind. Was this what shinobi called a mindscape? If so, then his was shit. It was damp and dimly lit. Almost with a depressing vibe to it. Maybe depressing was too harsh of a word. Wistful maybe. That felt more correct. But why? Sure, he had been depressed and angry when younger, but he had learned to let go of those emotions. Depression had gave way to hope and happiness. That anger had quelled into indifference. He hadn't suppressed them. He acknowledged the fact that he had them. So why was it so dingy here? He shook his head at the thought. Perhaps he could change it. The Yamanka clan had stated that an individual's mindscape represented the host's feelings. But he was absolutely sure he accepted his emotions long ago. Unless, perhaps the reason he felt so unwelcomed here was because he was intruding on the Kyuubi's domain. If that was the case, then Naruto actually felt saddened by that fact. The Kyuubi, a titan of power, personified hate given a true form. This was the exact opposite of what he had figured. Where was the anger, the malice, the rage? Were humans so terrified of the beast that the tales of the beast had long since driven their sanity? Naruto frowned at this. He slowly got up to only then realize he had been in water. It was murky. It barely reached his ankles and he couldn't exactly feel it. He bent down to see if he could run his hands through it, only to discover that it gave no resistance. The boy turned his attention to the front of where he was facing. It was only a singular hallway, the only light sources being candles that flickered every now and then. Now that he got a good look at the place, it almost seemed to resemble a sewer. That thought made Naruto nauseous. With the little insight that he was receiving, he was beginning to feel like the Kyuubi was misunderstood. But he also knew that he couldn't be too sure. He would save his judgment for when he met the fox. Naruto began his trek to what he assumed to be where the Biju resided. Taking his time to glance at the walls. There wasn't much to really see. It was as if the walls were just duplicated. Again, a morose thought. After what seemed like hours, Naruto stumbled into a ginormous room. The amount of space was almost incomprehensible. Towards what he assumed to be the center room was a gate that he assumed was crafted by the divine. It was taller than the Hokage monument, inscribed with kanji that he knew aided in sealing. The titanic gates were saturated in what looked like a rusty shade of crimson. If he squinted hard enough, he could make out a key holder of some degree. It was strange in design though. Similar to his clan's insignia. Figures that an Uzumaki seal was used. Not like there are any other options. The team thought in slight amusement. The space behind the gates was filled with a void of darkness that he could only describe as empty. It was blacker than black. And he wasn't even sure that was physically possible. He couldn't see anything past those gates, though that could be the seal's design. He proceeded to walk closer without fear. If he were being honest, he had been wanting to meet the fox for 6 years now. He harbored no ill will to the beast. They were both individuals handed with a shitty deck. It was up to them how they chose to deal it. He came within a few feet of the gate and patiently stood. He would wait for the Biju to initiate. He was aware of the fox and the fox was aware of him. He could sense the beast. What he was sensing was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. The sheer weight of the Biju's chakra was crushing him. He was absolutely positive that the Kyuubi wasn't directing it at him either. His shoulders visibly sagged and strained under the sheer weight of it. But he refused to show weakness. He would never cower to anyone. The teen was no longer that scared little boy. He had a family. He was strong. While he was aware that he wasn't the strongest or even a challenge to most veteran shinobi in Konoha, he was far from weak. He had bled, he had struggled, he had suffered. He would absolutely refuse to present weakness when in the face of adversity. "You impress me, boy." A guttural voice reverberated off the walls. Within the cage, an enormous eye opened up. Naruto was finally witnessing his first glimpse of the Biju. The scarlet eye was slitted, akin to that of a feral cat. But this was no common street feline. This was an amalgamation of the world's hate coalesced into the form of an animal. An animal regarded with incredibly high intelligence and cunning. Or so the legends stated. Even whilst being the center of attention to the Biju, he still did not feel that anger the beast was so commonly attributed to. No rage, no malice, nothing. The weight of its chakra remained, but that was a given. It put even his reserves to shame. And he had the most chakra out of everyone in the village. "Will you not introduce yourself? I gave you a compliment and yet you remain speechless." Speak, boy. The QB spoke as if it was speaking to a mere child. Well, it technically was. Though the tone wasn't mocking. Interesting indeed. Naruto decided to respond. Sorry about that. You're just really big. The legends described you being titanic, but it's entirely different when you can actually see it. The boy gave a rather real smile despite being face to face with one of the strongest entities the world had ever seen. My name's Naruto Uzumaki, future shinobi of Konoha, ramen lover extraordinaire and future head of the Uzumaki clan. Who might you be? The whiskered teen questioned back. He crossed his arms behind his head whilst continuing to smile at the fox. The fox regarded his host with slight interest. So this is Asura's most recent reincarnation. Interesting. The Biju was well aware of Naruto's thoughts and feelings regarding itself. The fox was indifferent to the boy. Despite what humans seemed to think, the Biju disliked humans. Hate and dislike were very different. Not like it truly mattered. They were foolish creatures. You are unique among your kind. The fox stated plainly. The pitch-black void dissipated, giving color to the entire cage. It was actually better lit than he would have thought. The Biju's fur was a shade of dark orange, possessing human-like arms and hands while having giant floppy ears, similar to that of a bunny. The young boy wouldn't voice that one. He highly doubted the fox would appreciate the statement. Naruto got the impression that the Biju was someone like Anko, an individual who demanded respect, and he would absolutely show the fox the respect it deserved. Thank you, the boy inclined his head slightly. Though, you don't seem like the legends state. He finished lightly, not wishing to incur the beast's wrath. The fox might not be showing that wrath, but it could at any time. He wanted the Biju to know he was being genuine. The QB did not respond, preferring to study the young man whose life it had watched since a young babe. The boy had ridden himself of his own darkness without even knowing it. Truly coming to accept who he was and what he was. It was something that was worthy of respect to the fox. The QB leaned its massive head on its hand-like paws and regarded the boy further. Naruto felt the fox resembled a docile dog with how it was resting. I am far from docile, boy. Naruto blinked at the QB's statement. Well, he now knew the fox could read his mind and most likely was doing so the entire time. He sighed slightly at that. Well, it's not like I can hide my thoughts from you now. The statement was said with false exasperation. He decided to sit down since he didn't know how long this conversation would be. Not that he minded the Biju's company. The fox was pretty chill. He thought so at least. He crossed his legs while placing his hands on his knees with a small smile. The fox eyed the teen for a few moments before releasing an intake of breath and shut its eyes. The boy was tolerable. It helped that he was far different from his race. Several minutes passed with Naruto eventually relaxing in his position and closing his eyes. Growing used to the weight of the Biju's chakra, he assumed this was how everyone else felt when they were subjected to his own chakra. Irony at its finest. The anger I felt. I couldn't think straight. The boy spoke while keeping his eyes closed, deciding to just speak his mind. I wanted to hurt everyone in that room. To crush them. To make them feel the pain that I had felt for so long. My entire life, I hated everyone. The boy started off hesitant but gained confidence the more he spoke. The fox didn't react, but it was listening, choosing to remain silent. The boy may have stopped suppressing his emotions, but venting was always something that could calm a person. So much of my life I was subjected to abuse from this village. The loneliness was suffocating. I didn't think it was possible to be able to drown because of words. But that's how it felt. The boy sighed sadly as he gripped his knees tightly. He hadn't truly confided in anyone yet. He loved Anko like his mother, but he was scared. Scared of truly opening his heart to the woman. The same went for Tayuya. And their relationship was. The boy shook his head at that one. She'd never reject him and he knew it. But he was terrified of returning to that darkness. He had wanted to commit suicide at the tender age of 6. A young child, choosing to end their existence rather than suffer. I wanted to take my own life when I was a child. A fucking child. His voice became hoarse, cracking with raw emotion. The fox was frowned as the boy opened his heart. How could anyone think a young boy was a demon? I suffered here. Red chakra gathered in the air and moved like a tsunami as it wreathed in the air. Similar to that of a cobra, wanting to lash out at anything threatening it. The cubist-eyed opened slightly. This fucking village. I hate it. But I also love it. The anger had simmered to more of a bitter one. I'll always love my home. But I'll never forgive the people who treated me this way. Is it wrong that I think this way? The red chakra had calmed down significantly but remained in the chamber. Now more akin to a rattlesnake. The boy had tears running down his face. How long had it been since he had cried because of his childhood? How much suffering had the boy truly endured? The fox's eyes narrowed in sadness. Humans sickened the strongest biju. It didn't understand how humans could treat their own kind with such hatred. Humans are disgusting creatures. There was nothing in this world that could change the beast's opinion. Despite what Hagoromo believed about humans, the fox knew the old man's perception of humans was completely unjustified. The Kyuubi didn't believe in Hagoromo's belief that humans could truly change. No, they would remain the same. Naruto was a rare case. Being Asura's reincarnation only further solidified that fact. How the boy could go through such awful conditions and remain a good person was worthy of respect to the fox. The tongue teen had gone quiet. Having gotten what he needed off his chest. The occasional sniffle rang out but he was no longer crying. The whiskered teen whipped at his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. Kurama. Naruto's eyes blinked at the statement while he looked at the fox in confusion. Kurama. The biju glanced at Naruto and nodded its head slightly. Kurama. My name. It's Kurama. Your mother, Mito Uzumaki, and one other were the only other individuals worthy of learning my name. You are the fourth. Naruto blinked at the biju's statement. He was silent for several moments. A large grin formed on the boy's face before he jumped up with an excited grin. Really? Oh man. That's so cool. Wait, you said my mother. The boy sobered up at the question. Kurama didn't respond to the question at first. A story for another time. You have learned my name. That is all you get for now. The fox almost sounded annoyed if it wasn't for the eye roll that accompanied the statement. It looked absurd but Naruto was still ecstatic. The fox trusted him enough with his name. He would prove he was worthy of it. Thank you Kurama. I promise I'll prove to you that it was the right choice. The boy ended the statement with a rather stupid-looking thumbs up. Hey Kurama, how do I leave here? Not that I don't mind the company of you or anything but Kurama knew exactly what the boy was getting at. The fox didn't understand why the boy and the redhead didn't just go ahead and mate. Humans were confusing and stupid. Your mate is awaiting you. Rather impatiently if what I'm sensing is correct. Colorful woman she is. Reminds me of your mother. The fox would dangle information for the boy. If he was as intelligent as Kurama thought he was, he'd figure out who his mother was. Will yourself to leave and you will. Now go, I wish to rest. Kurama demanded rather annoyingly. Naruto gave a smile at the statement and the demand. His form started to dissipate and he gained a soft smile. Thank you Kurama. Thanks. His hand scratched the back of his head as he waved with his left. Kurama just huffed as the boy finally disappeared. The biju was silent for several minutes. You're welcome, Naruto. Faint voices could be heard as Naruto began to wake up from his involuntary nap. His ears were still adjusting and his body felt incredibly heavy. His head was also pounding. As if something hard had hit him. The voices had an echo-like quality to them. Slowly but surely his hearing was able to level out. He heard two feminine voices. Both of which he was familiar with, one more intimate than the other. Do ya think I headbutted him too hard? Tayuya's rough voice questioned out. I highly doubt so. The boy is more hard-headed than the stone that makes up the Hokage Mountains. If he were to have internal damage from a soft headbutt, then he's clearly not as strong as I thought. Kat's voice struck out shortly after, having an amused undertone to it, one which slightly annoyed Naruto. You're both loud and obnoxious. It came out groggy and had a drawl to it, as if the boy didn't feel like fully committing to speaking it aloud. It served to amuse Kat and annoy Tayuya, to which she responded as per usual. Listen here you little shit. If it weren't for me, the Anbu would have knocked your stupid ass out. She glared at the boy as he, to no one's surprise, glared right back. Yeah, well, listen here, you little midget. You didn't have to headbutt me. Tayuya leaned in closer as she fired back immediately. It's not my fucking fault. You're the one who got mad in the first damn place. Quote, Naruto's upper body leaned up slightly as he challenged back. It's not my fucking fault that I have a giant fox in my stomach. Tayuya's eyebrow twitched and she proceeded to lean even closer to the boy. Their noses touching as she bellowed into his face. You're a fucking idiot. Quite succinct really. As amusing as this was to Kat, she knew she had to step in before they started to throw fists instead of words. Uzumaki's, the woman thought to herself while shaking her head. You two can continue your lovers' spat some other time. The entire hospital can hear both of you. I get that one of you is a sub and the other is a dom, but we tend to keep such things in private. Save that for when you're both alone at home. The statement was said with a great amount of amusement. Their reactions almost made her chuckle. Red colored Tayuya's entire visage while a spark of pink dashed Naruto's. Tayuya immediately sprung back from the boy's face while sporting an annoyed expression towards the Anbu member. Naruto turned a glare towards the woman as well. Their shared shout though surprised her slightly. Fuck you, they both shouted towards her. Yugao frowned with a slight sweet drop. These two were practically soulmates. If they didn't end up together, she'd retire and become a farmer for the remainder of her life. Those thoughts caused a certain memory of hers to surface. A handsome man with bright yellow hair sleeping soundly in a hospital bed such as this very one. A woman with vibrant red hair stared at the man in concern. Her hands would occasionally brush the top of the man's hands while she waited for him to awake. The memory caused a pain to rack through her chest, spreading across her entire body. She had to force herself to hold the shudder that wanted to surface. Kushina, her teacher, her idol, the woman she looked up to as a mother. Yugao wanted to be like Kushina. Confident, strong, and beautiful. She was everything Yugao wanted to be. She even picked up the art of swordsmanship because of Kushina. Learned to wield swords with her left hand instead of her right. Just like her teacher, the purple-haired Anbu had self-taught herself to become ambidextrous, wielding her katana in a reverse grip like her teacher had. A shudder she couldn't prevent hit Yugao's body. Her right hand clenched fiercely. If she weren't wearing gloves she was sure she would have cut skin and been bleeding. She had cried and mourned for Kushina when she found out the woman had passed. Her son being left an orphan. Not even Minato having survived. These thoughts continued to hammer into Yugao's very soul. She was the first person to volunteer to watch over Naruto. She would be damned if the son of her teacher would suffer in this village. She had killed many villagers for the boy. Hiruzen knew. There was no denying it. But the man would stay his hand. A tear slid down the woman's face. Naruto had grown up wondering if his parents abandoned him because of the Kyuubi. Never knowing if they truly loved the boy. She oh so badly wanted to tell the boy that Kushina would go to hell and back for him. She would fight an army of thousands just to get to the boy. Minato. She didn't even want to think of what he'd do should he had lived and something threatened the boy's safety. That man would fight gods to see his son's safety. He fought the Kyuubi. Most seemed to think the Biju was on par with gods. She knew she'd be executed if she were to tell the boy. It was the law. Hiruzen may have let the killings go unanswered, but Yugao would not live to see the next day if she told the boy. But the boy deserved to know who they were. The purple-haired woman steeled her thoughts. She would die today, and she would die with a peaceful smile on her face knowing she would bring Naruto happiness. Yugao was certain the boy had an inkling of who his parents were. Well, his father at least. But she could tell him. Confirm his suspicions. He'd finally, have the knowledge that those two loved him unconditionally. The woman reached for her mask so that the boy could memorize the face of the woman who had protected him his entire life for 14 years. To put a face to Kat. Her hands touched the porcelain plating of the mask as she prepared to introduce herself and inform the boy of his parents. Well, it looks like our little fox has finally woken up, eh? A voice stopped her dead in her tracks. She knew exactly who was speaking. That lazy drawl. Her hand still on her mask, her eyes snapped to the doorway. Leaning against it was none other than Kakashi Hatake, her old Anbu captain and Minato's student. His visible ebony eye fixated directly on hers. He had the attention of both Tayuya and Naruto, but he was looking directly at her. She knew the look. She knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want her to throw away her life. Her other hand clenched so hard that she actually did manage to draw blood. Kakashi had a sad look in his visible eye as he gazed at Yugao. He knew the woman wanted to tell Naruto. He remembered this exact scene. Having walked in on Minato sleeping while Kushina sat nearby. He could tell why the woman wanted to tell the boy. Kakashi also believed the boy was deserving of knowing who his parents were. But he wouldn't let Yugao throw her life away. Kushina nor Minato would want this. Yugao wasn't privy to the knowledge that Kakashi possessed regarding Naruto's parentage. It's not that the third Hokage forbade it because he felt the need to do so. It was because Minato himself forbade the knowledge. Despite how intelligent Kakashi was, he could never understand why his sensei would feel the need to do so. The third Hokage knew, but it's not like he would reveal it to Kakashi. He merely stated that it was Minato's doing, and until time presented itself would Naruto remain to be ignorant of his parents. Kakashi thought that sentiment was bullshit. If it was due to assassination attempts, they'd never get within 50 feet of the boy. Yugao was a hawk, a censor and an incredibly diverse fighter. She was known for her talent with a sword, but she was deadly with mostly anything. I want to do this. Cat voice came out calm and collected despite her inner turmoil. Naruto glanced at the man who seemed so familiar to Dog and then to Cat. She was happy yet scared. But why would that be? He could also feel sadness and regret directed towards him. What did she regret? He was still a little groggy, but he'd know if Cat had done something that would garner the emotions. She had always protected him. He didn't understand. Tayuya's eyes narrowed at both of the shinobi in the room. Her sensing abilities may not be as powerful as Naruto's, but she could practically taste the tenseness that hung in the room. It had to deal with Naruto. The way the whiskered teen's eyes shined with recognition towards the lanky man meant that this was one of his old watchers. It had to be. The way that Cat responded to the man only proved it. This man was in some way her superior at one time. And considering the woman was an Anbu captain meant this was her previous captain. But if that was the case, why was there an uneasiness in the room? If you do, you can't go back. The one-eyed man's voice responded to Cat. He pushed his body off the doorway and took a single step into the room. He had blocked the entrance. The only other being the open window behind Yugao. Yugao glanced towards the windows. She could sense them. 15 other Anbu members waiting. Watching. She wasn't a fool. She knew what would happen should she take this mask off. They'd all give her the time to tell Naruto who his parents were. But after that, they'd all strike. Even Kakashi. She was absolutely confident that she could deal with the 15 members behind her. It was the monster that was in front of her that scared her. She knew how strong Kakashi was. He was an S-rank shinobi for a reason. She wouldn't last 5 minutes against the man. But this was all assuming that the purple-haired woman would fight back. No, she'd say what she needed to say and bend the knee. Cat, don't do this. Every word came out slow and measured. Yugao's hands slightly shook. Tear drips were slipping beneath the mask, dropping to the floor. Tayuya's eyes snapped back and forth from the man to the woman. This woman, was she about to? Cat, why are you crying? I'm okay. See, I'm doing just fine. You don't need to worry about me. Naruto had a soft smile as he directed his gaze towards the woman. Assuming that she was sad because he had gotten hurt and didn't prevent the Cubus chakra from progressing. Gee, after all, it was his fault he got angry. There was a very long silence after Naruto's statement. Yugao's shoulders shook as a few more tears dropped from her mask before she took her hand off her mask. Leaving the cat-themed mask on. Her masked visage turned towards Naruto's and stared for a few seconds. Naruto's smile stretched larger when the woman gazed at him. Yugao's head dipped once and with that gesture, she disappeared with a body flicker. Kakashi's shoulders relaxed and he gave a short exhale. He had buried enough bodies of his comrades. He didn't want to do another. Especially not a former subordinate. And definitely not a student of the wife of his own teacher. Kakashi directed his vision towards Naruto and Tayuya only to blink and furrow his eyebrows at what he saw. Naruto was staring at the spot that Yugao had been standing in with a frown and eyes narrowed in sadness. He had sensed the pain in her heart. She was hurting so much. It was almost overbearing to the teen. She was ready to die, wasn't she? The whiskered teen's voice came out soft and quiet. Tayuya frowned slightly at his tone. That woman was indeed ready to die. For what? The redhead had no clue. But it had been something regarding Naruto. She wasn't as talented with sensing emotions as her cousin, but even she could see the wave of sadness being projected from the woman. Kakashi's hands found their way into his pockets. He stared at where Kat had been standing and sighed. You are correct, Naruto. She was. For what reason? I cannot tell you. I am forbidden by law to do so. The statement was said with such ease. As if it had been rehearsed hundreds of times. It wouldn't be far off from the truth. The former Anbu captain had gone over a plethora of things he could say to his sensei's son. He would eventually be placed on Team 7 along with Sasuke and Tayuya. Kakashi knew the reasons. Didn't care as long as he got to teach Mini Minato and Mini Kushina. Aren't you Kakashi Hatake? The asshole who knows 1000 jutsus or whatever. Despite how rude that question was, Kakashi couldn't help but smile slightly at it. Tayuya was a lot like Kushina. While Kushina wasn't as crass as Tayuya was, she still had her moments. They both shared tempers though. Maybe all Uzumaki women had short tempers. Tsunade was quick to jump to destruction and Mito was said to stomp on Hashira when he annoyed her. That's 4/4. Yeah. They were just violent. He gave his signature eye smile at the duo. The one and only. Now, let's talk a break. Sasuke stood with his arms crossed watching his mother spar with his brother and cousin. Spar was a light term. They were blitzing all over the field and the occasional fire jutsu would ring out, scorching the field and causing smoke to fog the area. His Sharingan was activated, revealing the pair of two tomos swirling slowly. Next to him sitting on the ground was Shisui's younger sister Rei, which he had an infatuation with. Her hair was disheveled similar to Shisui's. Long ebony tresses flowed down her back with no discernible pattern. She had a bang that hung below her left eye. Rei shared the same unique eyelashes that her brother possessed. Her eyes were more slanted than her brother's, reminiscing to that of a feline. A beauty indeed. She too had her Sharingan active watching the fight, though she only passed a single pair of tomos rather than two. She glanced towards Sasuke and pulled a knee up to her chest and hung her right arm over it. Hey Sasuke. Her voice was gentle and soft. She was different from many of the Uchihas that resided in the clan. Soft-spoken and kind. Both her and Shisui shared their kindness, but other than that they were completely different from each other. The male turned his attention to his crush. Yeah. She didn't reply at first, pursing her lips as she thought of what to say. About Naruto. That chakra. He's. Sasuke's full attention now on her, she stuttered slightly. The boy in front of her was slightly intimidating, but she knew he didn't mean to be so. He was actually very sweet. Well, to her at least. She thought so anyway. He's different. Sasuke nodded at that and gestured for her to continue, patiently waiting for her to continue, neither noticing that the spar in the background had ceased. His chakra was red, and he had slitted eyes. She slightly frowned before continuing. He's the Kyuubi's jailer, isn't he? She turned her gaze completely on him. The villagers always disrespect him, but he never had done anything wrong. The girl's fists tightened in anger. She hated rude people and bullies. It's why she was so confrontational with the other members of the Uchiha clan. They were always so rude to others. It annoyed her so much. Sasuke looked down at the ground at her response. He was glad that she wasn't judging Naruto for it, but it still saddened the raven-haired male. Naruto carried such an enormous burden. It was unfair to the boy, but nothing could be done about it. Sure, the chakra had frightened him, but the feel of the chakra wasn't necessarily evil. Angry yes, but evil no. Sasuke sighed as he nodded his head. Yeah he does. Sasuke possessed a small frown as the statement left his mouth. Rei gained a frown and tears of frustration appeared in her eyes. She had always been an angry crier. It was probably the attribute she disliked most about herself. But that doesn't give anyone a reason to treat him like he's not a person. It's not fair. Sasuke sighed as he sat down beside the girl and wrapped an arm around her, pulling her into a side hug. The girl leaned her head on Sasuke's shoulder. Yeah, it's not fair. But there's nothing we can really do, Rei. What do you mean there's nothing we can do? We could be friends with him. She accused him lightly, though she remained attached to the boy. Sasuke gave a small smile at the statement. I meant the villager part, Rei. Naruto and I are friends. Kinda, I think at least. He shrugged at that. Can't be sure. He doesn't talk much, but we speak with our fists. So I guess that makes us friends. The girl's cheeks reddened slightly at his statement. Do you think he'd want to be friends with me? Her eyes glanced towards Sasuke's face. The young teen narrowed his eyes slightly and shrugged. If you enjoy this fanfic, then please like and subscribe my channel Narutofix 11. Thank you guys.